Thank you for tuning in to Treasures in Heaven. I'm Daniel Catone, your host today. I'm very excited to welcome Marc Barnes to our show. He is the magazine editor and primary writer at New Polity. He's known first for his blog, Bad Catholic. That's actually where I first heard about him and started to admire some of the things that he was writing. He also owns a grocery store in Steubenville, Ohio. So we have the rare combination of a grocer and I would say a good philosopher. So welcome to the show, Marc. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Yep, just here to keep you informed about the price of eggs and then anything else you want to know.
And it's fine as long as we buy the eggs and don't try to sell them at a higher price, right?
That's basically right, yeah.
I'm just joking with you. So I first became to know who you were probably 10 or maybe longer years ago. You were writing for Bad Catholic, a blog I think you had. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Yep. Yeah.
Why'd you call it a Bad Catholic?
Because I'm a terrible person. I just wanted to acknowledge that so that no one could accuse me of it later. You know, in 8 Mile, Eminem, I don't know if this is a good reference, but he wins the rap battle by acknowledging all the other things that the guy's going to say. That's the same idea.
Well, I appreciate your humility. I hope your wife disagrees with you. I think she's probably a pretty awesome guy.
Well, she does often disagree with me. I'll give you that much. Yeah.
That's fair. I have a wife too. I know exactly how that goes. So I want to say one of the things that's very impressive about you is your diversity in your writing. I've read quite a few articles that you've written over the years, and I'm going to say just kind of a casual warning to our audience. I'm going to discuss a slightly sensitive topic right now. So if you have kids under, I don't know, say 16 or 15, maybe tune us out just for a few minutes. But you wrote an article that I thought was really, really interesting. And it's a throwback to your time at Bad Catholic. And so I didn't tell you to prepare for this. So if you don't remember all the details, I won't hold it against you. But you wrote an article called Naked Men. Do you remember that article?
It's definitely stirring some deep forgotten memory within me.
It's okay. I think you'll remember your argument. Don't be worried. I think it was a really brilliantly written article, and it was very popular. I want to say I read it on Art of Manliness or somewhere, Pathia, somebody that kind of republished it. But you were making, I thought, a very intelligent critique of what liberalism and modernity has done to the male body. Specifically, you were kind of poking fun at gym culture and how there was sort of these two groups of men in the gym. And you were saying that, you have the older crowd that's perfectly comfortable with their bodies being functional, beautiful creations of God. And then you had the younger men who were very uncomfortable with their bodies because of the pornification of our bodies. And I think that was the argument you were making, that argument. Does that ring a bell a little bit more?
Yeah. I mean, that sounds about right. Although I probably, I don't know if I would have described the older generation as being comfortable with their beautiful bodies. It's more like they were comfortable being big, fat, old guys at the gym. But
exactly.
That is, there's a beauty to it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm just curious. I was wondering, maybe before we get into the finance stuff, which we're going to spend a lot of time on today, can you kind of suss out this idea a little bit more with me? Can you help me understand and help our listeners and viewers understand, what has changed in our modern world in the way it treats the human body? And I think you might have some interesting things to say there. So I'd love to hear them.
Wow. Well, I mean, what hasn't changed might be more to the point. That the question is so very large that I'm staring into an abyss here.
It's okay. We'll take our time.
I mean, in that article, I imagine what I was doing in discussing the sexual education that's provided to most men by pornography, which is the primary and first experience of both nudity in another person and also in the idea of sex. I mean, most American men, anyways, have been exposed to hardcore pornography years, sometimes even a decade before they have any encounter with sex as a reality, and so it forms. It's the education. It forms the expectations and habits, and also just the wisdom of what the body means and what nudity is, etc. Um, and I think as a result of that, um, one of the lies of pornography is that all nudity is um, for the sake of arousal. So it kind of denies the amazing capacity of human beings to have a body that's in relation to the kind of gaze, the kind of look that they're receiving. And we all know this, I think, pretty simply. Like there is a difference between the way a doctor, for instance, to take an obvious example, looks at the naked body, and you're able to present yourself to a doctor precisely because he's looking at the body in a certain mode. But we all know what it's like, or we can all at least imagine what it would be like for a doctor to shift modes and to look at us with a different kind of look. Then we would immediately experience the defense reaction we call shame, which is the desire to cover ourselves before a look that's not seeing us as we want to present ourselves. That's sort of at odds with our own mode of presentation. Human beings are always seeking peace. We always want harmony between the way we're being perceived and the way we want to be perceived. These two things, yeah, they just dictate how we live and move in our bodies. And so I think the most basic argument is that once you create a culture of people who are educated on the idea that all nudity is arousing nudity, then you have the perverse effect of destroying any kind of comfort or any kind of ability to have a non-sexual space, a non-pornographic space. When I say non-sexual, I don't mean like without sex. I mean without arousal as its object. And that's sort of what you get at the gym. You can kind of see the difference between, people who weren't raised with immediately accessible hardcore pornography in their pockets, the pocket prostitute, and then the people who were. And I think that is also and there's a paradox there, right? Because the idea behind a lot of the marketing of pornography is that it's liberatory, that basically sex and its pleasures are repressed by Christianity and by tradition, and that joy is to be had in destroying the prohibition against these things. But the actual effect is because it destroys the ability to present the naked body as communal in other ways, as a object of art, for instance, as a object of beauty, and not necessarily an object of arousal, etc. Then it actually creates a timidity and a fear in culture. So you have this paradox in America that you have simultaneously a massive consumption of hardcore pornography and also a massive fear of exposure in every other context. But I think that actually makes quite a bit of sense.
I think it's quite brilliant. And it's, one of the things that started helping me like read more of what you were writing was this kind of early path that you took as a very young man. I mean, you must have been, 20 maybe when you wrote that. You must have been very young.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly when that.
Yeah,
when
no
that
worries.
Was.
Yeah, but I just think it's, you're a young guy, and to have such wisdom, that's really cool. And you've parlayed, I think, your wisdom into New Polity. Can you tell me a little bit about what New Polity's mission is and how you got involved with this organization and started it?
Yeah, New Polity's mission is the promotion of Catholic social teaching to the American Church, and to do so to give Catholic social teaching all of its teeth. So it is not, Catholic social teaching is not a sort of body of doctrines that we separate out from the rest of the Catholic Church. It is, in fact, the primary way that the laity are called to sanctify the world. New Polity is born out of a dissatisfaction with a kind of idea that Catholics, especially Christians generally, are supposed to live out some kind of parlay with the world and carve out a sort of private Catholic space in which to operate, when it's very obvious that our founder, Jesus Christ, wanted us to build the kingdom of God. Even though, of course, we know that there's a sin. There's reality that this kingdom is never quite built. The idea of giving up on the kingdom in advance, which has been the tactic of American Christianity for the past 100 years, is totally untenable. We fight to build the kingdom of God, and if we lose swinging. So practically speaking, what this looks like is there's a whole bunch of spheres in normal American thought that are off limits. They're off limit to religion. You might express it this way. So religion has a lot to say about your morality, but it has nothing to say about economics. The church has a lot to say about how you conduct your private life and how you conduct your prayer, for instance, but it has nothing to say about politics.
That's what the world's saying.
That's correct. Like that's the sort of idea, and the counter to that, the idea of Catholic social teaching is that Jesus Christ has not just the reform of this or that part of the person, but the entire human person brought into heaven is his desire, and that means our economics, that means our money, that means our politics, that means our wars, our fighting, our battles, the way we kill, the way we love, all of it. All of it is there to be redeemed, and any kind of space that says, well, this is not a religious concern is a way of diminishing the reality of Christ in the world. And that was an early conviction. New Polity gave it a way of expressing itself in, I think, a much more powerful way than, at least for me, I had been thinking about it. Because it located that lie as liberalism, and then it located the Catholic Church as the thing which liberalism is in rebellion against. And so it makes it clear that Catholic social teaching is fundamentally what we would call post-liberal, anti-liberal, and moving beyond liberalism into a new political order. As such, it is radical. It gets down to the roots of the problem, even as it's slow, which is just the truth of holiness as it grows in the Christian, generally speaking. It's radical.
I mean, it is radical.
Slow.
And, yeah. I mean, you make an interesting argument, and the idea of us having to grow into something I guess it would be pre-Enlightenment, really, since liberalism, as commonly understood, I think, would derive much of its thought from that era. Though, you look at like the founding fathers as a kind of conservative liberalism, in a sense, they would attempt to hearken back to the Greeks and say, they were just restoring and classically establishing what had been lost. I think McIntyre with After Virtue, I think, is probably somebody you probably read him on my hunches. Yeah. And I think you guys would be in very much alignment with each other, that we've lost the language of virtue. We've lost the language of ethics, and even discussing the subject within the context of liberalism is a fool's errand. And how would you distinguish this new polity, which you advocate, from like a traditional understanding of theocracy, where the government and the church are melded into a single unified force?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd say this, first of all, that there's nothing particularly traditionalist about this, in the sense of there's no era in which things were good that we should go back to in some sort of effort to repeat the past of the church. The church is humanity right now being reformed, right now moving towards heaven. And so the church right now is the work of moving beyond all of our sin and all of our error and all of our ignorance in the world. That doesn't mean that there's not a sort of privilege to certain periods that didn't have the errors we currently have, right? So if I look at the Middle Ages, it's not that I think we should become knights per se, but it is because
it would be better than a serf, I'll tell you.
I don't know. I'd like to be a serf. Well,
you could be. You could do that. There's nothing stopping you. That's the thing about liberalism. Kind of do whatever you want.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want within a certain framework of not being able to do what you should. But sure. But to your question, theocracy is a liberal thing. It's because it separates the idea of the temporal and the spiritual, of the idea of politics and the idea of the church. And then it tries to, I'm speaking very broadly here because this is,
sure.
But it tries to bring those
we'll
two
get more specific, I promise.
It just tries to bring back the two parts together, having divorced them in the first place. So you might imagine like a marriage, right? You could say, all right, we're going to divorce, but then we'll meet up.
You don't worry about the bishops. I mean, like if I were to pick who's in charge of the country, I don't know if I would pick the Catholic bishops. I love them and I think they do great work. I'm not sure I want them very much involved in politics, though.
The idea of bishops being involved in politics is itself a theocratic idea. What I'm trying to say is that rule of the government is itself sacred. It already ought to be what Christians do precisely as laity, as having a vocation to sanctify the world in and through governing, in and through rule, in and through politics. The idea that what it means to be a Christian in politics is to get your bishop to run a government or something is just to say I'm a liberal, because what you're saying is politics is fundamentally separate from the life of faith, and therefore to do politics, I would have to get some man who wears a certain kind of hat out of the faith world and bring him into this other world, which is city government and deciding the price of water, etc.
Interesting. And has there been like a case in history you would point to that would look like the new polity that you're talking about, or is it more of just an idea?
I mean, I think it's present in every single human heart when you see your work in the world as holy and your goal as the sanctification of the world. And that means through your work, through your job, to stop viewing these things as somehow apart from the church. The church.
I think we have absolute agreement here. This unification of the human person of all aspects of their activities is living out the gospel, regardless of what the context is what it means to be a Christian man, I think. So I think I completely agree with you. Practicality is kind of a complex problem here. Thinking about some of the ideas that you've just shared with us, how does a Catholic practically live out the new polity concept in, say, their voting choices, in the ballot vote? Because we don't have a king, we don't have this concepts and the things that'd be different, or whatever. In this new polity, we have what we have. We have a democracy, we have votes, and we have elected officials and all those types of things. I mean, how do you think they should opt out, or should they choose the lesser of two evils? I mean, how should we live that in a political sense or civic sense, I would say?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the reduction of the idea of participation in politics to voting is itself a symptom of the larger problem.
It's just one example. I've got other examples we could look at for participation, but just that example in terms of practical execution of this idea, how would a voter behave?
I mean, whenever you're vote for the guy you want to win. What I mean to say is there is not some sort of like dealing with what's in front of you, the way you described it, like we have what we have, is a way of describing like the beginning of politics, is that you're making prudential decisions on what to do based on the reality of the day of what's given to you. And that's never been different. So the reality that is given to Americans today is a bureaucratic administrative state pretending to be a democracy. So do what you can do within that. There's no, but the point I'm trying to make though is just that the consideration of politics meaning that, I think if part of the new polity way that you're asking about would be to do it without the allure of the idea that is politics, that politics is this, not what it means etymologically, right? With the building of the city, politics, polis, polity, but a sort of managerial thing you do every 4 years.
Sure. I'm certainly not trying to reduce our political engagement just to one specific voting act.
Right. No, I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying, I'm saying the question of like, it's like, well, how does someone with this mindset practically vote? So, well, actually, practically, I think that the practical need is for Christians to understand that they are doing politics in every aspect of their life, that there's no small little place to do politics and then you take your politic hat off and you're done. Insofar as all of the actions that we perform are building up the
Political.
kingdom of God, then they're all political. They're all building the world into a certain kind of city.
That is a very interesting idea, because the modern feminist movement and modern liberalism, especially communism, say the same thing, that every act is an act of power in politics.
I think
And
they're right about that.
okay, I don't, but we'll let that one go for now. I
No.
don't think
What I mean is like, obviously, I don't necessarily think that they are right by their meaning of politics or their meaning of power. But insofar as every act is an act for God or against God, every act is
yes,
tends to build us up in virtue or tends to lead us in vice.
I see.
Um, every act posits a certain kind of world.
I see what you're saying. Okay,
And
so
and
let me make
so
sure
yeah,
I understand here. So whereas a communist or a materialist is going to say that every act is political, every act is a exchange of power between, in the dialectic, I think we would say, or what they would say. And they are really kind of shrinking politics down to be the material engagement of this
yeah.
world, right? And so
Yeah,
you're saying is beyond the material engagement, every act is either building up the city of God or not, which may be like Augustine kind of view of our participation in the polis.
totally.
Okay.
Another way to say it is every act is relevant to our character. So the human person
There's no
is
neutral choices.
right is the kind of creature that crafts himself in the world through his actions. John Paul II writes beautifully about this,
It does.
and it's through the action that we become who we are. We're not given to ourselves in advance. We're flabby, speechless babies to begin, and it's not that we simply enter into a life that nature has totally predetermined for us. Rather, through education, we become particular. We start to sort of become less metaphysically flabby and more metaphysically shaped. You can see this obviously with work. It's like someone who doesn't work, their body becomes flabby. And then as they enter into a trade, their body becomes particular. You start to, you shake a carpenter by the hand, you can feel that he has been characterized by his actions over time. You know something about him. Well, that's always true. Like as a Christian, we know that the ultimate character that we're supposed to take is, and character means stamp in Greek, the ultimate stamp we're supposed to receive through our actions is saintliness. We're supposed to become saints.
Yeah.
So to
I
say
like
that
that.
every act is political in a full sense is really to say the same thing as um, every act is going to help us become the saints we were meant to be or not.
Like C.S. Lewis had a line, I'm going to misquote him, where every person you meet, it might have been G.K. Chesterton, I don't know, you are either helping them to eternal glory or helping them to eternal damnation.
Well, yeah.
You're helping craft others through your behavior. So let's switch gears a little bit to more specific in this concept of politics and your engagement in the world to talk about investing and finance a little. Um, New Polity has a particular stance on investing. Can you kind of talk to us about your position on investing briefly?
Yeah, and let's Dan, I'm no finance guy.
That's okay. I'll make up for it. I'm no philosophy guy.
I say dumb stuff about money,
No, no,
and
no.
I
I'm
think
sure you're going to say fine things. I'm not here to argue. I just want to hear understand.
um so no, I well, what do I think? I think that we shouldn't give money to people that don't care about us, and I think that investment should be real and should be as local as possible. Um, and when I say local, I don't just mean like next door. I mean like they should be efficacious within a person's life to a great degree, and I think that um, the the kind of basic system of investment that we have been in is actually um, taking away from the power of the laity to shape the world in a Christian way.
I actually completely agree with you. I do. I think that our dollars are best spent with our neighbors, and there's a proximity of of the way in which we use our goods and those around us. I think J.D. Vance got in trouble with that, quoting Aquinas a few months ago. But I think he's right to a point. There is something to be said about local action and having the most effect possible. I think where this becomes more complicated is frankly realities of just daily living. And I was listening to your partner, Jacob Imam's debate with Trent Horn on the subject of, is it immoral to invest in a 401k? And I wasn't convinced by his arguments. I thought he made some good arguments, specifically on usury. And obviously I run an investment management company, and so I'm going to fall on a different position than he would on that subject.
Or you could quit.
I could, but in fact, I've chosen a different path. The path I've chosen is to try to purify the options that are available to people so that they can make practical choices that are in alignment with their consciences. And I think one of the arguments I think that Jacob made is that investing in publicly traded companies is an attempt to speculate on price movement. And that speculation, which is clearly condemned, in my opinion, by the magisterial teachings of our church, is you can't do that. You can't do speculative investing in that sense. But my problem with this argument is that he seems to stretch the idea of speculation to cover any attempt to gain value in your own life from price change. And I don't think that's what the church intends when it talks about speculation. But I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about speculation before I continue on that subject.
Yeah, I mean, the teaching of the church, as I understand it, is that, think about the scripture verse, the good man, the just man takes pity and lends, right? So when we're lending, we are taking pity on someone who needs money, most fundamentally. And what the church has said is there are justifications for that investment, but the fundamental motivation for investment is that pity. It's that desire for there to be a good that would not be possible without your contribution. It's a desire to participate. And I think that I don't know precisely what you're referring to when you talk about stretching it to
I'll explain
talk about any value increase. I don't
price increase is
price
what
increase.
Saying.
I see.
Mm-hmm. It's a different.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily the case, because I think price increases, depending on the investment, can be indicative of the labor that you've enabled through your investment.
That's value creation.
So capital without labor doesn't get anything done. Labor without capital is unemployment. And the need for capital, people with money, to enable people to work is a good and noble thing to do. And that work does ideally produce profits. And I think that is a just reason to participate in the profits of a labor that you haven't enabled. So to give a real practical example, I'm really excited with the grocery store we have. We've been working on building a commercial kitchen. Now we don't have the money. We don't have any money, but we don't specifically have the money to
Can they
build
go to a website to give you money?
No, you can go to newpolity.com/donate to give us money. But investing money is a different story, because what we're able to do is say, hey, we don't have the money. You have money. Help us to overcome this need for a commercial kitchen. And if we can get it, then it enables all of this work. It's also an invitation to the investors, because it is local, for them to have a better grocery store in their town. But the fun part is that they get to take money that's otherwise not being used for the kingdom, and then turn it into labor, and then receive part of the profits of that labor. I just think that's a very simple idea. So I don't. So that's not so much. That's to give an example of something that isn't quite the same as what
Are
we're
your
doing.
investors trying to get a return on their investment in the grocery store, or is it more of a charitable donation?
No, they're getting a return.
Okay. Right. So you don't have a problem with speculative return, or excuse me, you don't have a problem with monetary return per se. It's only if that monetary return isn't also attached to labor productivity. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's how I understand John Paul II's teaching on this, especially. So speculative investment means that the return is not related to an actual participation in increasing in the opportunities for labor or the direct enabling of um, labor, but on the price change alone.
Yeah. Well, what about dividends? As it's different than price change, so that would be a different argument, I'd imagine.
I don't know anything about dividends. You
That's okay.
you tell me, and I'll respond real time.
Yeah, sure. No worries. I did not expect you to maybe know the details there, but dividend is just a share of profit back to the investor, and it's
Oh,
actually the
sure, yeah.
majority return of the. So, for example, the Dow, the
Yeah.
majority, or very close to the majority return of the Dow has just been the return of profits, and so that's not participation in the price movement per se. You know, one of the issues that I had with what Jacob said, and I'm not expecting you to defend everything that Jacob said, that was this argument that price change in itself as a speculation for return is the immoral issue. That's one of the immoral issues that he said, talking about common stocks, that type of thing. You buy in your 401k, a mutual fund, and you hope to sell it for a higher price later on. And I think one of the distinctions that he failed to make, and I'm curious what you think about this from a philosophical level, not even from this pure finance side, is the distinction between price and value. And I think where he was kind of getting hung up is that you buy something at $10, you sell it at 15, and so that's the speculation. However, if the reason for the price increase is the value of the thing in which you purchased has increased because they're selling more product and they have better, supply or whatever it is that they're doing, wouldn't that be fine for an investor to do because the thing itself is providing value to people and that value is reflected in the value of the enterprise, which they own a piece of. And so it's not a speculative price change, but a value change. Does you see the distinction?
Of course. No, I mean,
Okay.
I think that you are, as I understand it, summarizing Jacob's position.
I hope so. Well, I
maybe
want to summarize it well.
The problem with the stock market is, well, one of the problems with it is that it provides a mechanism for having price change without value change.
Yes, it does that. You're right. And there are people that will do, for example, high frequency trading, where they're basically rent seekers. I mean, they're buying a security, selling it in 1/10 of a second, and doing these
the whole
arbitrage
thing
things.
is obviously, the whole stock market system is rent seeking. I mean,
Well, we can come back to that, but let's start at least with the first argument that you made, and that there is a way to use the stock market for evil, and that would be purely speculative price work. However, I have a hard time then saying that all participation in the stock market is evil, because you can, for example, buy into a company that is promoting the common good in many different ways, and you are an owner of that thing. You have voting rights, and you can actually steer them towards the good, and all kinds of things like that.
well, then why have it be a stock? Why not just be an equity investor in the company?
Well, that's what a stock is. So stock is an equity investment in a company. So anytime so let's say you and I start a company together, and I have half the ownership, you have the half the ownership. We can legally designate it as, say, an S corp or a C corp, so that I have one share and you have one share, so we both have a share of stock, which is basically what you're doing with the grocery store, which I think is fantastic.
Sure. Let me back up, because maybe that question didn't quite make sense. So, with owning stock in a company, I have the ability to sell that stock to another buyer, not, and I have the possibility not of profiting on the basis of the company's contribution to the common good, but I have the possibility of profiting off of the buyer's own evaluation of the company as being a better, like the price itself of the stock rising. So what I'm saying is, like, with
Well, you're going to ask a question.
With like a contribution, like if I'm for instance just investing and I'm receiving some share in the profits of some labor that I've enabled, then the profits are usually in that sense like a good marker of good being done in the world. Like, I mean, it's not necessary, but with a stock, the price might be the price of the stock might be related to the good the company is doing in the world, but it could also just be related to speculation on the future of the company. It could be the price could go up because of marketing from the company. The price could go up because of stock buybacks. There's a whole bunch of ways that you could make money on the stock price going higher that do not reflect the company actually contributing to the common good.
Well, I guess that gets to my point. Yes, I agree that there are ways to invest in stocks that would be objectively immoral. But I guess what I'm trying to understand is, are there any ways that you see that a person can commonly own shares in a publicly traded company and not be sinning?
Oh, well, I think the difficulty is that when we decide that this is the way that we are going to, we are going to choose a method for investing, which is always open to the possibility, if not by us, by the next person down the line who we end up selling the stock to, of this kind of behavior, then I think we are always, choosing an inferior way. So I think
you're close. I mean, I think what you're trying to get there is just like material and remote cooperation. Just because a thing could be used for evil, like a gun or sex or whatever, does not mean the thing itself is immoral. So, the retiree who owns a utility company and is creating, a 5 or 6% dividend distribution for her to pay her bills. I have a hard time getting there with, getting to sin from that position.
Yeah, I mean, if it's just a return on the basis of profit that your capital is enabling, I don't see sin. If it's a return on the basis of selling a stock high in relation to its previous price, which was low, without any intrinsic relation to the value produced by the company, then
Got it.
It is.
Okay, I think we agree here, actually.
But I think the distinction here is that I think the reason the stock market exists, as opposed to other forms of investment, is precisely to enable the ability to make money on the sale of a stock.
No, I disagree with that entirely. That is not why the stock market exists. And this might be just a finance thing. The reason the stock market exists is to provide a liquid market for people to buy and sell securities for whatever purpose. I mean, people sell and buy stocks for all kinds of reasons. As you talked about, you even illustrated, share buyback is very different than the little lady buying a dividend stock, which is different.
Well, no. Sorry, maybe I should make a distinction. I of course, there are many different reasons for people participating, and that's where that's why it's a kind of it's not as a neatly cut thing, because
this is a complex topic.
There's our subjective participation in it, and in sort of moral thought. That's where we refer to our culpability in regards to it. But then there's the broader question of like, why is it that the chief structure of investment right now is investment through the mechanism of buying stocks low, selling them higher, with no intrinsic relation to the value of the company, only an extrinsic relation to it.
I just don't think it's not in relation to the intrinsic value. I think you're making an investment.
No. You're making the relationship. It does not. I'm sorry. I said that the rise in the price of the stock is no longer related intrinsically to the good the company is doing in the world. It often is.
How do you measure that? How do you measure the good the company is doing in the world so that you can choose to invest in it or not? Because I would argue that price discovery is how we determine that the masses of investors are determining.
John Paul II says something like that, where he says that profits can, and I would say even like profits, that's to say a abundance produced through labor. Those profits can indicate they are good indicators of that a company is doing good in the world. that's true. And so there's something about the ability to share in the profits of a company.
That's dividends.
No, that's great. I'm happy to be a pro dividend man.
Nice.
Yeah.
More agreement. Huge dividend fan.
If that's what they mean. I mean, it seems to me like they often seem to operate as incentives to stock ownership, rather than as the chief way in which someone is enabling the labor of a company and participating in it. But I can imagine, for instance, if you're just, for instance, describing only dividends, and not the ability to buy a stock low and sell it high later, then it seems to me you're just describing profit, like sharing in the profits.
And I think this is where the distinction of price and value is really important, Mark, because, in a sense, you could not. I mean, I think the biggest violator of your rule for investing would be gold, which is a problem because I think you've argued that some people could invest in gold and real estate, but why would you invest in gold if you weren't intending to sell it for a higher price at some future point?
I don't know anything about gold per se.
Okay.
I was saying that the value, that profits indicate that good is being done in the world. And the problem that I have with the way that we do stock investments now is that indication becomes, or the gains you can make in the stock market, only might indicate that a company is doing good in the world, right?
Okay.
So, for instance,
what would give us more surety? What would we need to have in order to have surety that they're doing good in the world, other than price?
So this is let's back it up, because it's not just, I think, a question of surety, because that just presumes that there's nothing wrong with this way of investing. We just need to make sure that our gains are related to the good the company is doing in the world. But what I'm trying, maybe I'm not being clear about this, is that once we're no longer gaining from a share in the profits of a company, but we're gaining on the sale of the stock, we never have that surety that the so, for instance, take like the GameStop example is one that I often use. So this was GameStop is and I actually have an inability to explain it.
You know what? You can skip that explanation. I will say, we will not disagree in any way whatsoever on investing in GameStop, because not investing, that was just speculation. And so what the distinction that I'm trying to draw out here with you and New Polity is the distinction between price and value.
Okay.
Price is what you pay, value is what you get. And there is a idea out there in sort of the laity of investments in the investment world, folks that are not professionals, in that it's just like a casino, that you buy a stock and you hope it goes up, and then 3 months later you sell that stock and you make some return in the difference. But that's actually a very, very small percentage of serious investing. Serious investing is where you identify a company, you identify its value, then you identify what is a fair price for that value, which is a share of its profit and voting rights.
How do you determine its market value?
Great question. The way we determine market value right now is basically democratic, that everybody determines market value, but what the market is willing to bear for a buyer and a seller.
So it's just the price of the stock.
The price of the stock reflects the value, correct? Right. And so if the value increases over time, for example, Amazon, which provides tremendous value and some problems to the world, in the year 2000 was, $1 a share, something like that. And right now it's, some huge number. Well, that huge number is reflective of the value that is being generated by that company through its earnings, through profit.
Yeah, but what I mean is the actual increase in price is no longer it's been divorced in this model of the stock market from you can increase the value of that stock through marketing, right?
Not really, no.
Well, I mean, Tesla seems to be able to pretty well.
No, they increase, but the marketing allows for higher sales, which allow for higher revenue, which is the value that then is reflected in the price.
You seem to be describing a world in which there's some kind of surety that the stock price always reflects good done in the world, and so that
eventually it does reflect profit and earnings growth. Yes. That's like proven mathematically. That's not debated so much in finance. That
The-
eventually the fundamentals of the company win, which is why GameStop won't be here, and you
uh,
lose all your money.
no, but the trouble with that is that, I mean, there's a couple difficulties. It doesn't seem the idea that it's eventually going to win out does not relate to what we're doing right now. So if it's the case that a stock can reflect not the actual good that a company is doing, but many other different mechanisms for increasing stock price, then um, we might say, okay, but eventually in the long run, only doing good will produce profits. But right now, if that's not the case for a company, then people are able to buy low and sell high, not on the basis of, I mean,
But they shouldn't do that. I agree with you. They shouldn't do that. I think that's a bad
yeah,
thing to do.
it is a bad thing to do, but
Yeah.
it's a bad,
Speculation is bad, but what I'm trying to help maybe get us to is that speculation and investing are not the same thing,
I agree.
and that
Absolutely.
price and value are not the same thing,
I
and
also
that
agree.
okay, so we agree on the concepts. Application of the concept in our daily lives when we invest our monies, not everybody has the opportunity to invest in a local grocery store. And some people, should invest, frankly, in publicly traded securities and do so in a way that doesn't violate Catholic social teaching. Because I think if you, and I don't know if you're saying this, but if you were to say it is a sin to participate in the stock market and buy securities and then sell securities at some future date, that's that participation and collect dividends along the way. We have a big problem because the church herself in America is telling us to do so and doing so for herself.
Yeah, I do think it's a big problem. If you take I don't know, a couple hundred feet back from it, I think the fact that our priests and religious are retiring on the basis of the success of the major corporations that they're invested in and their success in the world does indicate a way of being tied to the success of this world that seems to be a risk to the liberty of the church. I think that's true.
I think that is true. I actually am a huge, I would say, critic of the current system in which we fund our priests' retirement and pensions. I think you are onto something very interesting there, that we should be supporting our priests and religious by our own wealth. Where we might disagree is the way in which we create our wealth to support the priests would still be within that system, that there really isn't a way for us to be fish not in this water. And so
No, I think there's
perhaps,
something to that. Yeah, I think it has to be like I said, in the beginning of talking here, the growth in holiness is slow. I mean, I think the idea that the only way to support each other to build the kingdom is through a mechanism in which value and price are divorced, and in which the benefit that we're capable of giving to the church depends entirely on the benefit of corporations that are increasingly against the church, seems to be a situation where we could all at least step back and say, well, that's not ideal, even if it's the water we're swimming in, like you say. Question would be like, what
yeah,
steps do we take
practical application. Yeah,
to
yeah.
to be able to come to a form of investing in which we can really say the good man takes pity and lends, in which we can say that capital is for the sake of labor, capital is for the sake of enabling labor, and anything that tends us away from the real production of opportunities for work, which produce profits in which we can participate because we're one community taking care of each other in this way. Anything that gives the possibility of doing otherwise, namely speculation, should be something that we wean ourselves off from however we can.
Yeah, and I think maybe our point of agreement is if we could properly define speculation within the context of the public markets, I think we would agree that no one should be doing that. I don't think people should be doing speculative investing for two reasons. Number one, it doesn't work over time. It doesn't actually get the results they want. And number two, it's immoral. I think it is not the right thing to do. But I think, the person who prudently chooses their specific companies they will invest in, knowing with research that they don't violate Catholic social teaching through their participation in their economic activity, um, like the little lady who buys the dividend stock. I don't think she's sinning, and I think actually she actually is contributing to the common good by her participation in owning that company. Would you disagree with that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I would. I would disagree in that. I think and again, I'm not versed in a lot of this here, but it seems like what's happening is that it's not the case that she is intrinsically contributing to the ability of that company to do labor and good in the world, and then receiving a return from that work and the profits it produces. She's receiving a return on the sale of the stock, which is extrinsically related to the activities of the company in the world, but has been sort of what you may say metaphysically divorced from it. So it is, let's hope, God willing, the case that it's all according to that old model. It's just the stock happens to be a way of getting it, namely that company does great things, company makes lots of money, people who give capital to company enable that wealth, and so participate in it and benefit from it. And this all happens through the mechanism of stocks,
Mhm.
right? But it's
Bonds.
also, yeah, sure. But it's also the case that what becomes possible in this system and is that the a rise in the stock price is no longer related to the value of the company.
Yeah, I think that's probably where we just disagree. I would argue
How
mathematically
about,
that's
here's a question.
sure.
Is it possible for a company's stock price to rise without an increase in the company's labor or
What
profits?
do you mean by increase of their labor?
Is it possible for the company's stock price to rise without the company adding value to the world?
Yes.
Okay. So if that's the case, then is it not the case that anyone who is benefiting from uh, stock investment as opposed to other forms of investment is potentially speculating in that regard?
Yes. If you are investing in a way where you are attempting to do, frankly, short-term trading, which is what you're actually referencing, um, to speculate on price change divorced from the fundamentals of the business and the activities of the business in the world, then I think they could be potentially sinning. Yes.
Well, I think
However,
the intention should always be good. I presume that no one, not one person on earth, besides maybe, I don't know, maybe there's some people that very much intend, you know, I think, I mean, I've never met anyone who doesn't intend to only profit off of the good that the company does. I admit that. So in that sense, I think no one is sinning in the sense of being subjectively culpable for like, I intend to profit not from uh, price changes alone. I don't think
well, that's
maybe
that's GameStop investors and
sure.
Bitcoin a
So
lot of times. I mean, there is ways to do it. I promise you. What
well,
I'm
but
what
then
I'm trying to say is that there's a distinction.
even they say things like, but I am doing good by virtue of, I mean, sometimes I think it's never quite in good faith, but sometimes even they say things like, well, I'm correcting prices and I'm
I don't know about all that. I would say though, I know lots of people that work in finance that do financial activities that would violate the clear teachings of the
so could
church.
you be, here's a question. Could you be a little old lady and you have great intentions because you're a little old lady, and that's part of what makes you little and old and a lady.
Rosary grandma.
And so you are getting a diversified portfolio from your finance guy, and you're really excited because um, all of the companies in your diversified portfolio, are doing good in the world, and that means that the returns you're getting are related to a value that's being created through your capital, and you feel good and justified as a little old lady.
That is a thing that could happen. Yes.
So, okay, we imagine that. Now, could it be the case that despite the lady's intentions, those companies, through various things that happen, whether internal to the company or external to them, have increases in their market value that do not reflect the increase of value that they give to the world? Is that theoretically possible?
Of course. Yeah. Yes. That's possible.
Okay,
Yes.
so then I think my argument at that point should be somewhat clear that I think what the stock market does is it puts people into an occasion in which it is possible for them to be benefiting off of prices increasing without value being added to the world.
It's not possible for her to know that. There's no
Right.
scenario where she's going to know.
Absolutely, which is why I say there's no culpability for that little
Right.
old lady.
Okay,
But I think
gotcha.
that's precisely what makes it wrong, is that little old ladies are entering into a system in which they can be profiting off of price changes alone, and they'll never know it.
Do you have a checking account?
I do, yeah.
Do you get interest on that checking account?
I do, but
Do
this
you
is
return it to the bank?
um I don't. I
Why
think is
not?
describing it. To be clear, I think that for the same reason that I have a mortgage in order to get a house, like the Aquinas is very clear on this principle that um, we can make use of sin, of the structures of sin in the world, um, and that kind of participation is possible, especially where there is a where
But you are
it,
materially benefiting from a derivative, something that's price is divorced from the value which it creates.
dude, absolutely. I'm materially benefiting from all manners, I think, of structures of sin, and
Yeah,
it
all of
is
us are.
absolutely 100%.
But we must do whatever we can. I mean, I guess in context of your grocery store, which again I think is fantastic, and people should help you with it. Um, is there a scenario where I buy, share ownership in your business, and then someone comes to me to buy that share from me, not because of the value that you added in the company, but just because of some other thing that's not related to value creation or labor? Is that possible?
No, not with the model that we have.
How so?
Um, the the return is a return of our profits for a fixed amount that can't be sold to another person.
So if somebody buys into your grocery store, it is prohibited under any scenario for them to transfer ownership to another person for a price.
Well, is it prohibited under any scenario? I don't. The I,
And perhaps you haven't memorized your legal documents, so I'm not going
yeah.
to
No.
force you to remember that. But I guess here's the point that I'm making:
The
that I
goal
don't.
here is that they profit off of the profits that we are able to produce
Sure,
by virtue of their capital. And if they, and
totally.
because we're talking about a small, very local operation.
Yes,
We do not want anyone investing who isn't
of
someone that
course.
we are part of. So we're not allowing, like we we don't want suddenly like BlackRock to show up and be like, yeah, Jim sold me his share in your grocery store and we've got some ideas for you. It's like, no, absolutely
Fair.
not.
No,
So
I
that
understand what you're
isn't
saying.
the case.
No, I think that's great. I'm just trying to try to understand, because I think that there would be a scenario where if I were a local person, I invested in the grocery store, where let's say I'm just out there in the world, and somebody comes to me and says, hey, I see you're an investor in this grocery store. I live nearby. I'd like to buy your shares from you. And unless you were to prohibit them from selling it at a higher price, it would just have to be an equal exchange. I think you'd be participating in a small sense in this price discovery problem that you're addressing
Well,
for the stock
maybe though,
market.
but if you're getting like quarterly 15% returns, or rather, if you're getting quarterly
That's
returns,
dividends.
dividends, thank you,
Yeah. Yeah.
that are going up to a 15% total return, then it seems like you would be able to, you might, like, if you, wouldn't it kind of depend on, I'm thinking out loud here, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. This is fun.
it would kind of depend on where you're at in that cycle. So like you could be, as an investor in a grocery store, you could have been with us for long enough that you'd made some percentage of of that 15% dividend. Is that right?
Yeah. 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 You're good.
Okay.
Yeah. Just share a profit, basically.
Yeah, share profit.
Yeah.
And then so um, I don't know. I mean, I think there would be a way to justly sell it where you were not, where that benefit you had received was present, so you wouldn't have to sell it at a higher price. That would essentially end up getting you more than just the 15% return that you had already received.
Will you limit the number of people who can invest in this thing, so eventually there's a finite number of shares or ownership of the company?
Yeah, limited.
Okay. So
Yeah.
let's say you guys kill it
I feel like now I'm getting free advice.
A little bit.
I tricked you into it.
I love it. I'll happily
So
give
what
free
do we
advice. I get
do?
advice all day. So normally people pay me. It's all right.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
So in all seriousness, so if you sell shares in your grocery store and you limit the number of shares and you guys just kill it and you're doing 15% and it becomes like easy to give people 15% returns,
No,
5 years
yep.
or 15% profit share, or, however you want to say it, that's fine. And at the end of 5 years, it's just going gangbusters. It's basically a sure thing. There's no way to lose money in it. And then I come to you and say, hey, I've really liked being a part of this. I don't want to be a part of it anymore. When I first invested in it, it was very sketchy and kind of iffy. And I'm not saying it's now like that now, but maybe it was.
Totally, yeah.
And now it's like a sure thing. So I'd like to sell my shares to somebody who is willing to pay me for this sure thing when it wasn't a sure thing at the beginning.
Oh, I see the confusion. No. They're not. The shares are not in perpetuity. 15% and you're out.
So once you get 15% return, you're no longer an owner of the company?
No, we throw you a party, we shake you by the hand, and we, yeah.
I see. So you did like a seed capital raise where you just raised money. You're raising money, promising a 15% return to get it off the ground, and then it will be owned entirely by who?
Me and my wife and my buddy and his wife.
I love that. Okay, so cool. It's like a family small business. So, imagine a scenario
that
then.
Makes me a pop for the mom and pop shop.
I think it's cool. Is Jacob the other owner?
No.
Oh, different. Who's the other owner?
It's a friend of mine. I don't.
Oh, it's a secret.
Given that it's not a secret. I'm just like I hadn't told him.
No worries.
He wanted to be talked about online.
Yeah, no worries. That's fine. Yeah, we have millions of viewers.
Oh, sure.
So imagine a scenario where you guys do this amongst yourselves. So you raise enough capital, you pay everybody their 15%. They all are now your shoppers or whatever. And then you and your partner go down 5 years and your partner comes to you and says, hey, I'd like to no longer do this. I don't want to be involved in it anymore. How would you determine the price you would pay him for his shares so that you and your wife become the only owner?
I had thought about that.
Well, the reason I asked the question is more to make a point in that I don't think there's a way to avoid in any scenario, whether it be public stocks or private stocks, you cannot control why someone wants to pay you and why someone would receive those dollars. Like their intentions are unknowable. And yes, maybe they relate to value. Maybe they relate to labor considerations. Maybe they relate just because they think it's fun.
Yeah,
maybe it's a tax concern.
The ability to pay him anything in this scenario would come from the not like a market price of the company, but its actual value, which would be reflective of all the work that it had done.
The market price is derived from the value.
Well, the market
so you have to agree on the price, the two of you.
Oh, sure. But I think
just like stock ownership, you agree on the price. And I don't know why the other person is valuing the company at what they are. I know why I'm valuing it where it is. But I guess my point is, I don't think you're escaping the problem of stock price intention, like the intention behind why somebody values something in your own private ownership. Which I don't think it's a problem, but maybe you do.
Well, it just seems like it's different. It seems like in the case of someone wanting to say, okay, we've built something here, it's profitable, and we would like to no longer be owners and take some share in the profits.
Share in the value of the company and take it out and walk away. They get the cash, you get the shares.
I think we would only do that through the profits of the company, though. I don't think we would do that.
Well, what if you got an inheritance? What if you got a $10 million inheritance from your grandma and he wants $10 million and you want the shares?
I think that confused me. Whoa.
Well, think about it like this. Maybe it doesn't come from the profit of the company. Let's say you kill it with the business and 5 years down the road, your partner comes to you and says, hey, can you pay me $10 million for my half ownership, my shares of this company, because I think it's worth $10 million because of the value that's been created in it. And because you guys are doing great marketing, or just because I think it's a good idea, whatever, it doesn't matter, but you'll never know why they're valuing it at that. Not really. And so as soon as you sell the shares, you would be participating in their sin and you would be participating in the change of price that's not necessarily dependent upon value.
But I mean, that sounds like it would be an obvious an unreasonable thing to do. It seems like you could determine some limit, like similar to determining a just wage or a just price. You could determine
Just price. Just price is determined by value.
Right, but value. I mean, you can look at the you can make a reasonable determination of value, and not be trying to speculate in that
Yes,
determination. You can
I
just be
agree
trying to.
completely. That's my point, is that there is a possibility that your partner buys your shares for bad reasons. There's also a possibility your partner buys your shares for good reasons. Just like the little old lady has the ability to buy shares for bad reasons or buy shares for good reasons, they're the same thing.
Certainly doesn't sound right on the face of it. Like, what I mean is that in the little old lady example, um, I think maybe part of the difficulty I'm having in understanding the argument here is that, there seems to be a certain, like, opportunity cost in, choosing to go the route of using stocks and such um, instead of profit sharing. Where,
What do you mean by opportunity cost?
well, I mean that when we often speak of it, um, like there's no other option for investing, and so, but what I mean is when the little old lady is presented with, um, the diversified portfolio, then she's presented with the possibility of, profiting off of price increases that do not reflect value added to the world.
It could be done with real estate too. Most
Right.
investing is real estate. So
Sure,
the,
sure,
the
sure, sure. No, no,
alternative to real estate is stock. So
no, no. I'm not denying that. I'm just saying, that, for instance, something like in investing in a company, with a definite return, that's on the basis, out of its profits, seems to be the thing that we are not doing with our money. And the thing we are, by and large, doing with our money is instead this other model. So when I say opportunity cost, I'm just saying that I mean it in a broader sense. Like, we have decided and are working hard to build a world in which most people's hard-earned money goes into one possibility and not into others. And I think this is a that's just something I don't think has to be, and I think we have stunted our imagination, on this basis.
that's
So
fair.
why
That's a
not?
that's a that's a fair critique. Let me just tell you where I agree with you on that, because I do. I think it would be really cool if we lived in a world where it was all locally owned grocery stores and we had the return concepts that you've built and everything like that. And in a sense, we had that world a while ago, call it 200 years ago. And that world grew into publicly traded equities and everything that we have in the sophistication of finance today. And I wouldn't say that it's an inevitability, but it is a natural process, as in a sense, it's a natural process, or naturally logical, I would say. Your concept of share ownership of your grocery store is very clearly, to me, a very small example of a publicly traded security. It's private. That's one difference than a publicly traded security, meaning it doesn't trade on an exchange. That's all that means. It is
That
a,
seems highly relevant, though.
it, uh, not really. If I were just to say I've got three businesses that are all owned locally, and here's
Oh,
what the
on an exchange. I thought you
yeah,
meant.
yeah, on an exchange, as in like a place where they buy and sell stock, the stock market.
I thought you meant
That's
the value being produced from the
no, no, sir.
exchange,
No,
not,
sorry, I didn't mean to be
or the
confusing.
price being, or yeah, the returns being produced by the sale of the stock, and then
Right. No, no, no. That's not what I mean. So
I see.
exchange is the place in which the transaction occurs. And so there's a distinction of where the transaction happens, or like in what legal structure that transaction happens. But fundamentally, a share of profit, that's a dividend, just like a public security has. You own part of it, your partner owns part of it. That's stock ownership right there. The price of the company's shares is determined by buyers and sellers, either amongst yourselves as partners or with a third party, and you have no control over the offer that they're going to make to you or why they're making that offer, whether it's based upon value or just their own whimsy. It could be anything. And so I frankly don't see a distinction of of species between a private investment locally and a public investment that the little old lady's making. There are downstream effects, though. I think you've hit on something really smart here. Specifically, the local participation in the grocery store is something that cannot happen in a publicly traded security. But I don't necessarily think that it's bad that it can't happen in public security. It's just not the thing that it is. But I think it's very, very good that you have that in your grocery store. So that's just where I'm seeing distinctions and similarities between the investment concepts.
All right.
Does that seem reasonable at least?
I mean, it seems to me that there are distinctions that seem more relevant. So, for instance, the perpetuity of stock investment as opposed to a limited amount and a limited time frame. The source of the return being through the sale of the company. I'm not certain on, but it seems like for the investment in the company, the source of the return being the profits of the company as opposed to the sale of the stock seem to be two essential distinctions between the forms of investment in that sense.
I see what you're saying, but you could sell your shares legally to your partner and you'd have to decide what the price is. And if the company has increased in surety and the profits have increased and the value has increased, you would ask more than your original investment from your partner potentially.
Yeah,
and
but then in that case, I think that would be actually prudentially determined on the basis of a very visible increase in value to the world.
And I would argue,
not what's visible to the little old lady as far as her investments in Google and Amazon are concerned.
I don't know how much clarity you could have on
like
price.
You could be unjust and you could lie and you could say,
assume everybody's telling the truth and that you have like earnings reports and all that kind of stuff.
If we sit down and say, look, hey, I want to for all the labor I put into this company and for the good that it's done in the world, this is, I think, a good price for in this scenario. Then it just seems to me that is an actual evaluation of the value of a company, and that seems to be precisely the kind of negotiation that's not available when you are just invested in the stock market.
Yeah, it's a fair distinction. I think it's clearer on a local level how much value is being added to the world through the work of that local thing because it's just more visible, it's more obvious, it's more distinct.
Well, and in the case of two owners, you're the one doing it.
Of course, and the two of you can look at it, unless the two of you decided to tell to a third party, at which point they'd have to make an evaluation of how much they would be willing to pay you. And so you could go to them and say, my partner and I, we just going to move on and do something else. We're both becoming, medical finance professionals, let's say. You would say to that third party, what would you pay me for this business? And the way in which they would determine the price they would pay you is, yes, on how much good it's done for the world, but what does that mean in terms of a check that I have to write?
Yeah, this is the concept of being able to determine a just price. It's not like a definite number. Like it is a matter of justice between the two parties as they determine the reality of the situation. I mean,
that is stock price, though. The stock price is determined by two parties, thousands and thousands, millions and millions of two parties, making a determination between each other what the just price is for this security.
Now, hold up. How do thousands and millions of people determine justice together? What you're saying is the result is just because of
No, the price itself is the way in which price is discovered is the agreement of the two parties of what that thing is worth.
Yeah, but there's a difference between two parties saying, hey, I think this is what this is worth, and the other party saying, okay, I agree, but we also need to consider what I have to offer and my needs, and we come to a determination where we can know what the other needs and know what they want and know the value and time put into it and make a just exchange. And then the way that the the way, I mean, again, no expert here, but it seems to
You're
be the way
good.
that,
You've
the way
done
that,
great.
the
I would
way,
think you're an expert.
man, thanks.
Yeah.
The way we arrive at prices with thousands of millions of people is that we each are trying to gain from the exchange, and so there's a mechanistic reality that ends up in an equilibrium because, um, you know, people who have to sell will only lose so much, and people who have to gain will have to will
You to
in
buy.
this sale, or sorry, to buy
Mhm.
can only spend so much, and so an equilibrium is found. But that's not the determination of a just price. Certainly
No,
not what Aquinas means.
yeah, perhaps it's not what Aquinas means, and perhaps it's the
Definitely. I mean, like
yeah.
the actual determination of justice is a human
Mhm.
act where you're determining the needs of the other person.
Yeah. Well,
And
the need of the other person might be liquidity. They might say, "I just need the money to pay for my medical
it
bills."
might be, but when you're trading on, you're on Robinhood, you don't know any of that.
I agree, and people should not trade on Robinhood.
And
We agree with that.
when you have a diversified stock portfolio, none of that's happening. Like you don't know the needs of the people who are ultimately the buyers of the stocks that you hold.
Well, their need is to sell the stock.
Well, I know, but that's a tautology. Like obvious.
I'm gonna let you have the last word on that. So, I just want to say, Marc, it's been a great pleasure and honor to have you on the show today. You're a good sport. You got into the ring discussing a very complex finance topic, and you're not a finance expert, but I think you've tricked everybody into believing that you are because you're very well versed on these subjects, and I think it's really cool. And I think your application of Catholic social teaching and Aquinas to the decisions that you're making actually in your life is very admirable. And I think the work that you're doing on the grocery store is very admirable. And while we might have some disagreement about how little old ladies should invest their dollars, I think fundamentally, I think what you're doing is great. And I support New Polity, and I think the discussion is important. I don't agree with everything New Polity has to say. I doubt you guys agree with everything I have to say, which is okay. But God bless you in the work that you're doing. Can you just share with our listeners where they could learn more about the grocery store?
Man, I mean, honestly, I feel a little embarrassed that it's become a focal point as an
Okay,
example.
well, we could look at, well, that's
No, no, no,
fine.
no, no. I know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All of which is to say is like it really is just a grocery store, and so you have to come to Steubenville and buy eggs. There's nothing else to do.
Cool. It sounds like a cool thing to do when I go to Steubenville next time. I'm going to for
please.
sure.
Well, and I say eggs. I mean, it was cool. It was a cool experience because one of the things that I love about the grocery store is we're trying our best to keep the produce, the meat, the milk, the eggs as local as possible. And the reason is because when we are able to have a local family produce something, then we are able to make it easier for them to live with us and stay here. I mean, this is one of the difficulties I have with the idea that the large corporation, is itself a good for our country, because I think one of the things that it misses is the way that our shopping, our just buying things, our trading, our determining of just prices should be
Community.
like building a community and not breaking
Yeah.
it down. And so but it's and usually though it's difficult, right? Because I mean, everyone knows this. So you go to a farmer's market, prices seem higher. It's like there seems to be this sort of and there's a reason for it. There's a lot of it is about product quality, but there seems to be this thing where it feels like you can either have local and it's doing all this good, but it's expensive, or you get to choose corporate. It's not necessarily doing all that good, but it's cheap. And usually, yeah, totally. That usually checks out in my brief experience as a grocer here. But every now and then, the house doesn't win. And our egg prices, when egg prices were soaring throughout the country, just stayed the same, because we weren't, like, if you're getting eggs from a small farm, and they're as long as they're not then saying, oh, I can cash in on egg prices, and I'm gonna, even though nothing in my life has changed with my chickens or my farm, I'm gonna charge $7 for a dozen because I can. They didn't do that. They were just like, no, it's just another Thursday, so here's eggs at, sell them at $3 for a dozen. Every
great.
now and then, it's very rare, but every now and then you can have the local and the beneficial to the community and beat the price.
Well, I'm hoping that the model that you're building becomes something that can be replicated across the country.
Well, in
And
some ways, it's like it already was. I mean, the mom and pop grocery store was this like mythical
Bring
part
it
of
back.
America,
Yeah.
and we're doing things, and often people are like, "Well, this is really innovative," and it's like, well, I mean, if you meet someone who's over 70, it's not innovative. It's just feels like kind of what
New
they
to
have.
us, I guess. You're talking to a guy who lives on a ranch and whose kids sell veggies at the local
Oh yeah,
farmers market.
awesome!
I'm a
That's
big
awesome.
believer in the locality of what you're doing. And so, but I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for being here. God bless you.
Yeah, of course.
And, I'm grateful for the work that you're doing both at New Polity and with your grocery store. And I hope we can
Thank
stay
you.
friends and in touch.
Absolutely, Dan. Thank you so much.
God bless you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.